Welcome to the Rainmaker Podcast, where we elevate marketing leaders inside and out. I'm your host, Veronica Rami, master marketer, executive leader, and mentor to ambitious marketing leaders wanting to advance their careers. Each episode is filled with genuine, unscripted conversations with some of the world's top marketing experts, accomplished leaders, and industry trailblazers representing brands, both large and small. Our goal with this podcast and everything we do is to help you master your role, nurture your team, prioritize your well-being, and evolve into an industry-leading Rainmaker. This is the Rainmaker Podcast. Welcome to the Rainmaker Podcast.
Thank you for having me, Veronica.
Yeah, I'm really excited. Okay, so this is a really timely conversation for a couple different reasons. One, I think a lot of people are looking to jump ship or have already jumped ship or are about to get laid off from the ship. I don't know, like the ship's moving and you're not on it in some capacity. But then the other thing that I'm really excited to talk to you about, because your specialty is helping people be employable, helping people be picked, is one of the functions that I perform in one of my group programs is we do a little bit of matchmaking. Where we'll match visionary CEOs, basically entrepreneurs, with prospective rainmakers, aka marketing leaders. So I'm not a recruiter. I don't identify as a recruiter, but I have so many rainmakers in my universe, and I know so many CEOs, and they're both orphaned. And so I do love a little good, some great matchmaking where I'm like, like you guys are both looking for each other. Call each other, let me know how it goes. But in my program, we will facilitate that, or people can pay me to interview their final two candidates. So I'm on a lot of interview calls.
Yep.
And I definitely have the things that I look for or the red flags that I'm like very conscious of for that role. And so I would love our listeners of this podcast to walk away feeling like you're going to help them get picked. So first of all, how did you get into this? Like, how did you become the expert of helping people become employable? Like, I need to know just out of curiosity.
Well, I would say, it is the combination of my own personal and professional experience, and my career is on two different tracks, right? I've been a marketing executive in the tech industry for several years, and alongside that have worked with candidates to gain admission to top MBA programs.
Yeah.
So these two things have been very complementary over the last, I would say, 15 years when I've been doing both. And they've really helped me assess and evaluate how I approach the professional workforce. And then, of course, how I help candidates at these key transition periods in their careers as well. When they're leaving the workforce, going into an MBA. And of course, our relationships continue and I see them re-enter the workforce in a different capacity. So all of that to say, I would say just my practical experience and seeing and helping others, similar to how you do, right? Just help me help others think about how to position themselves, right? It's a marketing exercise.
Yeah. So this is interesting to me because I find or have found that marketers are the worst at marketing themselves. And the irony is like we're so good at marketing other people's services and things. But of ourselves, we can't do it. Or it's really hard to be meta with ourselves and to produce our own star. So all of those skills that are so valuable to another human being or another organization, like we forget them in regards to ourselves. So let's start with that. Like, how do you help people understand that they do have to actually market themselves, just like a marketer has to market a product or a service for another?
I think it all starts with knowing who your customer is, and I'll use that term customer lightly, right? But you're always working with a set of stakeholders, either internally, right? Even marketers struggle to market and sell themselves internally within an organization, right? And that can be as simple as putting themselves into, their teammates' shoes, right? If they're on another team. So for example, I worked, in marketing. I had cross-functional stakeholders in product, engineering, sales, etc. So in order to market myself effectively, I had to understand, how are they perceiving me, or what might they not be getting from me, or understanding what my team and I are doing. And, it can be as simple as just, communicating on a regular basis, right? Sharing with them what I want them to know, and the progress that my team and I have made was huge. So even just taking the word marketing out of it, right? Of course, a marketing, what I'm doing, what my team is doing, but it could be as simple as, communicating that information, because we know from, being in the workforce that, sometimes you have to over communicate. People
Mhm.
forget things. Maybe they don't hear them the first time. Maybe you
Sure.
need to write it down rather than say it in a meeting. It might take a few times to enforce the message.
Yeah, no, 100%. So, I know several incredible marketers who are fantastic,
Mhm.
and then they lovingly choke. Like, they get so nervous or they get all up in their head at the container that is the interview.
Yeah.
And so they don't they're like their truest colors don't really shine or come
Yeah.
through because they're analysis paralysis or the perfectionism that kind of sets in. And so let's start with like decorum and like demeanor. Like when you're helping people get chosen or get employed, how much emphasis do you put just on like their conviction, their aura, their energy going into it, let alone the things that are coming out of their mouth?
I think that's a big factor,
Mm-hmm.
especially that now that a lot of these conversations are happening virtually, just like you
Mm-hmm.
and I are talking right now, you kind of have to, like, you have to be really diligent and really mindful of how you're coming across through
Sure.
technology like this, and, come in with the mindset. You don't have the benefit of nonverbal communication, right? Seeing someone's body language, seeing whether their body language is open or receptive to what you have to say versus closed off and distracted.
Mm-hmm.
People can be distracted on, a Zoom meeting, right? But you can't see it sometimes because you
Mm-hmm.
don't see the windows behind yours
Mm-hmm.
in that conversation. So, I think that poses an additional challenge when interviewing. But I think even more importantly, I tell people this is an opportunity for you to evaluate them,
Mm.
right? Any interviewer, any company, presents this as a process, and it is a process. There's multiple steps to getting a job these days. It's not just meeting with one person and getting an offer letter. It is meeting with the hiring manager, meeting with the recruiting team, meeting with cross functional stakeholders, meeting with other people on your potential team. And in order to make a right choice, you want to make sure that, you're vetting them just as much as they are vetting you. And you're evaluating what it is like to work with these people,
Mm.
because if you've made it to the interview stage, you're probably qualified for the job, right? You've checked a few boxes on the resume, the experience. The recruiter likes what they're seeing. They're putting you forth either internally, or if they're an external recruiter, they're putting you in front of the team, and there's something that they liked about your candidacy that
Sure.
got you in the room. And so now the rest is a test of, are you a good fit for the team? Do you think in ways that will benefit the team? Do you present in ways that will be constructive to how they work together? And, I know it's tough because you can't get a vibe for that immediately. And some of these things I'm talking about are so personal to, how you communicate and do business.
Yeah.
But I think, I'll conclude on that note of it's personal, but, as much as they try to get to know you in this process, they don't know you. So you really do have to remove that personal reaction if you don't get chosen.
Sure.
There's so many factors out of your control. They might have hired internally through a connection, whatever the case may be,
Mhm.
that you have to keep in mind that, a better fit is out there for you.
So I don't know if you saw this like social media trend earlier in the year that was like out with this and in with this. Like, so like, 2024, out with this, but in with this in this new year. I'm curious from your perspective, because I'm sure you've seen great interviews and you've seen terrible and you've seen everything in between. So what do you feel like today in this marketplace, out with what, but in with what? Like, I'm curious from your perspective if we had to play that social game.
Yeah. I have a hard time thinking like out with what. I'm not entirely sure. So give me a second to think about that. But the interviews that when I've been recruiting for my teams, for example,
Hmm.
the interviews that went far, the candidates that went far and or were hired, were the ones who really thought about how they could contribute to the team,
Okay.
right? Like everyone's there to get paid, to pay their bills, to hopefully progress in their careers. But the people who were thoughtful about asking questions and then, proposing ways that they could take an initiative or problem forward, even if the answers weren't correct per se, like they were the ones that stood out in the process. I think, right now, I know that people are like really, really trying to make a good impression. They need a job, etc. And the people who are more kind of transactional are likely or less likely to be successful in the process.
Well, I like what you said at the beginning too about because I one of my favorite shows was is Shark Tank. Like I love seeing business owners like
Yeah.
pitch and have conviction behind their ideas and like that passion that comes through, visionary level passion of
Hmm.
something that is they see clearly what has yet to come to pass. And so
Yeah.
when I get a candidate, and like you said, they could be radically wrong. They don't know the business yet. But like the fact that they come into the
Yeah.
interview and they have like the conviction or the I don't know charisma to be like, I could take your business further. I could do these things. I don't know where I got this. I remember this though. I want to quote it, but unfortunately, I'm like I can't put it in a footnote. But there was something about the way that Facebook used to interview was like we don't want to hire people that want to work at Facebook because they want to work at Facebook. We want to hire people that don't like Facebook and want to make Facebook better.
Yep.
I work with a lot of personal brands, and so sometimes I'll get in interviews, and they're more excited about the prospect of working with like their idol than
Yep.
pitching what they're going to do to help the business and the mission forward. And so I try to filter out the fangirls, like the fans, as much as possible. But it's interesting because I feel like when I used to interview for corporate positions, I would do like my research on the founders and the partners and this because I always try to drop a little golden nugget to like showcase my research.
Yeah.
And people love hearing about themselves. They love, being seen for their hard work in the past. Do you advise your candidates, your clients to do little tidbits, little secrets, little hacks or tips like that as well?
I think you hit it spot on with describing Facebook,
Yeah.
right? People have to be obsessed with and love to tackle a particular problem. Because at the end of the day, everyone's getting hired to perform a task, to
Yeah.
do a job, to solve a problem that the company is tackling,
Mhm.
right? So my career has been in software for small business, which is incredibly difficult. It requires a certain velocity and volume of sales. It's very different than the enterprise sales motion,
Mhm.
and a lot of companies have not made it selling to this market. So the types of people who have been successful in this, if I can borrow from my own experience and from my hiring experience into these roles, were people who were really passionate about working with small businesses and obsessed with solving this problem. Like they really wanted to tackle this challenge.
Because something that I advise, not my rainmakers who are trying to get the job, but my CEOs who are trying to employ the right person.
Yep.
Now, especially, I mean, I don't know if you've seen it on TikTok or different social media where like people are doing their interview and they have AI up at the same time and they're like AI is telling them what to say on the interview. It's like wild how like the cheating that's happening, I guess, in the interview process. So one of the things I'll advise my CEOs to do is to do some kind of a paid test project or some kind of usually, and I do encourage paid. I don't want anybody to do this for free, like to provide free
Yeah.
strategy or free anything, but to put together some type of project or test of some kind to showcase a candidate's critical thinking, resourcefulness, like
Yep.
to see these attributes live in action, not just to have somebody articulate that they're resourceful. How much do you see test projects or some version of that? I mean, I've seen like personality assessments used forever, but
Yeah.
how many times do you see candidates also being given an opportunity to do some kind of test or some kind of showcase of skill?
This happens a lot. I see it a lot, especially in more like senior marketing
Yes.
roles.
Hmm.
Some companies still have the audacity to ask you for a marketing plan for free. And that has historically been where I've bailed out. I think
Yeah.
that is absolutely unacceptable.
Yeah. Agreed.
You can pay for it, great. Or, one of the things I like is just kind of walk through, I walk us through either a past example from a candidate's experience, or something that another company is doing,
Mhm.
right? For example, I was hiring a product marketer a couple of years ago, and I asked her to just walk us through product marketing strategy for another organization that she liked, and said, "Oh, by the way, spend 45 minutes to an hour on this, and we're going to talk about it in an interactive conversation." So, we weren't soliciting free work that some of these companies are, and we were just kind of removing our company from the conversation and trying to understand how this person thought,
Mhm.
and what she saw out there in the marketplace as well.
Yeah, I love that actually. Hey, Rainmakers, it's Veronica, and we'll get back to today's episode. But before that, I have an exciting invitation for all of you aspiring, ambitious marketing leaders. If you are serious about advancing your career in marketing and you're looking for an expert to give you some personal insights, guidance, tips, then I'm going to invite you to schedule a free Pathway to Promotion call with me. This is a special one-on-one call with just you and me to discuss your current roadblocks in your career, your long-term aspirations and ambition, and the next best step for you and your personal promotion. Head to pathwaycall.com or click the link in my show notes to schedule your free Pathway to Promotion call. Now back to today's episode. Yeah, because I think what you're paying for, especially like when hiring marketing talent, because there's a lot of great marketers. There's really phenomenal human beings out there. I'm obviously
Yeah.
extremely biased. I love my marketers, but not every marketer is right for that product, that
Yep.
business, to represent it, to bring its services to the marketplace, right? And so if you can't discern or at least walk away from an interview understanding somebody's unique perspective, like how does this marketer see the world? Because we all marketing is half science, half art. Like we're these smart
Yep.
creatives, and so like how does this particular creative or how does this particular marketing artist see the world? Because how they draw in the world is how I need to make sure that I want my company drawn in that fashion.
Yep.
I like the test that you gave because that actually would show me their perspective, how they viewed their favorite marketing strategy of another company, so I can get into their eyes, into their shoes, and to see their perspective. What other cool tips like that do you like to really understand, get a 360 view of a potential candidate when it's a really significant position?
Yeah, I would say, every challenge, even when you're interviewing for a very similar company to the one you're at. And I worked at three companies that were very similar back to back, but the challenges were all different because the contexts were different, right? So I think, in the spirit of that, what I would recommend is that people emphasize the transferable skills and how they think and how they work with people, because those are the things that are going to stand the test of time, right? You're not going to come into a new company, even if it's a similar industry, similar product, rinse and repeat the same strategy.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to understand the context in which the team is operating, the market in which they're selling, and create something appropriate
Mm.
for that market.
Okay, you brought up skill, and this is a question that I have. Do you feel like employers seeking new candidates, new talent, are putting more importance or desire on the skills that a candidate brings or the leadership abilities? Like, how much is individual contribution and results versus the ability to get other people to contribute and produce results? Like, what is more important right now at this season?
With the more senior the role, the more emphasis on directing people
Hmm.
and getting the best out of individuals on that team. I would say in the more, functional roles like product marketing, content
Mhm.
marketing, demand gen, et cetera, more emphasis is placed on the technical skill.
Mhm.
How advanced are you in certain capacities, and that's where the conversation is centered around. But as you move up
Yeah.
in seniority, it's more about your leadership capabilities, your fit with the executive team, and how you view the world and how you strategize and organize your team.
How do you do that? How, because that's the hard. It's like how, like parenting. What kind of mother are you? Are you tyrannical? Are you way too permissive? Like it's the same thing with leadership. Like, and every candidate can lie. Like, oh, I'm really collaborative. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
How do you actually figure out somebody's true leadership abilities and style? That's so. I think that one's harder because candidates can lie through their teeth, right? They're not or they don't really have a full understanding of how they actually are. Like,
Yeah. I think it's difficult to assess. Like,
yep.
these senior roles take a long time to fill because they are setting up a number of
Hmm.
conversations. The process is drawn out. It takes months for them to evaluate candidates, and they can invest quite a bit of time and money and still be wrong,
Yes.
right? That happens all the time, and either the person will adjust and fit the mold or what the team is looking for, or they'll cut their losses and move on,
Yeah.
right? So yes, like, the interview process is meant to suss that out, but it's imperfect, right?
Hmm.
You don't really know how someone's going to work out until they're within the organization and they're facing the same problems that the team is trying to tackle.
Yeah, I tell people, like, I've interviewed so many people at this point in my career, so many people, and even as discerning as I feel like that I am, or as much as my BS detector is like, you know what I mean, like it's on, it's sharp, I still sometimes will have like a 50% success rate where I'm like, damn it, like they
Yeah.
got through, like I was wrong. And I do peer interviews and I do test projects, but like you're right, like until you're in close proximity working on something with someone else doing hard things is where people's true colors really shine, especially in adversity. I don't know if you prescribe to this belief system because I kind of heard it said, but maybe not, where you're like, hire slow, fire fast. Is that something that you prescribe to?
Yeah, I think, it really depends on the company, obviously, and like the need for the role. Like, some
Mm-hmm.
positions need to be filled in dire straits, right? In which case, like, there are definitely tools. You can contract to hire someone,
Mm-hmm.
right? You could hire a fractional executive.
Mm-hmm.
You could hire an agency if we're talking about those individual contributor roles. There's lots of ways to do this besides just like this traditional full-time route, and I think that's exciting. But yeah, I have, in my experience, and I've seen this, across teams and all of my companies. It's hard to let someone go, right? This is their livelihood. They've got to pay their bills. It's a big part of their identity. Yet companies, they hang on to employees who aren't performing, and maybe they don't have the right structures in place to, assess and give feedback on performance and check in on that often enough, and support someone where they're falling behind. And obviously we could go down a rabbit hole on that,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yeah.
yeah, overall it's tough.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to ask you this kind of final question. For those that have been trying to find a new work home and it just hasn't taken, what are those three, you know, micro changes that you would recommend immediately? You're like, listen, if it's been a minute and you're still not finding that new spot, there's a really good chance that you could either do this, or this, or you're not doing this or this. I'm
Yeah.
just curious.
Well, it's really tough right now because I think there's more candidates than there are opportunities. So
Yes,
we've got a
ma'am.
supply and demand problem. And, even an adjustment by the candidate might not solve the problem.
Hmm.
However, I think that people can redefine or, reassess their definition of work and what, their income might look like. I think the world is kind of moving more toward flexible roles and structures and fractional opportunities, things like that. So I would, highly recommend that people, take on something part time, propose a contract,
Hmm.
do something to get a foot in the door, because that might lead to other opportunities down the road. It might not, but it could lead them to income faster, especially if
Hmm.
they need it. But it creates a relationship with an organization. It creates an opportunity for the candidate to build out his or her portfolio and skill set, and at least have some employment and income. So I think that's a good lesson for all. It's really tough to get a full-time job right now. So if there are other avenues, they're definitely worth exploring.
I love that. I'm a huge fan of creative compensation.
Hmm.
One, providing it to others, also two, being the recipient of it and proposing it. I think there's more than just W-2 or bust. in
Yep.
2024 with this kind of virtual economy. So I couldn't agree with you more. Okay, so we do this kind of thing on the podcast where we actually save the last question for you to ask me whatever you would
Hmm.
like. So put me on the spot.
Veronica, what do you wish you had known early in your career that would be helpful for you today?
When you first said my first name, I was like, oh, like Veronica. I'm like, oh no. What do I wish I would have known in my career that gosh, like 16 years later? I mean, there's a lot of things, I'll be honest. I mean, I messed up a lot. Like I screwed up a lot. I think for me, it took me way too long, especially probably as a female professional, to not have to overly masculate myself, if that's even a word.
Hmm.
I think I had where I mean, it's not bad advice. I get it, like fake it till you make it. But I think for female professionals, fake it till you make it means emulating or modeling male counterparts.
Hmm.
And so it wasn't like said to me that way. I think I just was like, oh, I see the most successful individuals happen to be masculine. So I want to model success. So what does that do when you're starting your career at ancestry.com at 20 years old? Who are you modeling? And even if we had female leadership, which we definitely had, we had a female chief marketing officer at the company, but she was also extremely masculine in her mannerisms and her way of being. And so I think I swung too hard, I think, in an inauthentic way, trying to model what I thought would get me the success that I was seeking,
Yep.
versus I have found that possessing both empathy and space, but also clear and direct. Like I think I've learned that in leadership, it's a juxtaposition of qualities, which I didn't understand that before. Like the best leaders are actually paradoxical leaders. They're both open and firm. They're
Yep.
creative and analytical. Like same thing with great parenting. Like to be both is actually to be balanced and harmonious with yourself. But I think early on in your career as a professional, you tend to swing more in one of those categories than the other. And it took me a really long time to embrace the paradoxical qualities of leadership. And so that's something that I would say is like stop fighting that and embrace both sides. And it's actually in the middle that makes you the most effective leader possible for other people.
Got it. That makes sense.
Thanks. I got nervous when you first asked me, like, what do I regret? No, I'm just kidding. Now that I go through my whole history of like all my mistakes. No. Laura, you're a dream. I really enjoyed our conversation, and our listeners won't see this because we'll cut it out, but we have both of our puppies in this recording. So like keeping it real. But I do love it when listeners reach out to the guests and like DM you or message you and tell you their favorite moment from the segment or that really helped them. So where can people reach out to you and slide into your messages?
Probably my LinkedIn
Mhm.
profile is the best.
Okay, awesome. Well, we'll link your LinkedIn, we'll link all your websites, we'll do everything in the show notes. But I just want to say thank you so much for being on today's Rainmaker podcast. Thank you for joining us on today's Rainmaker podcast. Marketers help other marketers. So if there's a marketer in your life who could really use a new perspective in a way that helps them advance their career, please pass this episode forward, share, leave us a review. Everything helps as we embark on helping as many marketers elevate themselves inside and out. You can always visit veronicarami.com for today's show notes, additional links to some free resources and tools for you to help you advance your career. You can always connect with us on social media at Via Romney if you want more behind the scenes or a way for us to connect personally. Until next time, my friends, make it rain.